Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 108 of the war in Israel. I will be joined by Morgan shortly. Today we're talking about Cenk Uygur. It's not the first time. I really hope it's the last time because when we talk about Cenk, I have to watch some of his stuff. I think you've seen one, you've seen it all pretty much. Cenk's shtick is, to be angry. He's angry about everything, which kind of, I think it kind of defeats the purpose of some things you really do need to be angry about, but also, um, yeah, his reasoning is, let's just call it flawed and weak, and for some reason, when he's talking about Israel, he does debates, which Cenk, I know you're watching this, I know you're our number one fan. You really should not be debating people because it does not make you look good. Your audience loves your anger. They'll listen to you no matter how angry you are and about what. But when you are debating someone, that you're exposing yourself to a new audience, which probably is not buying your bullshit. Morgan, you are joining us, I see, from a different setup. You had some technical issues, but yeah, maybe I think Cenk would be probably better off if he had some technical issues. So let's talk about some specifics. I mean, I watched some of his recent debates or some parts of some of them. I'm a selfish person. There's a limit to how much I'm willing to endure of that. I think you have probably watched more. So do you have any kind of opening remarks, any general comments on Cenk and his crusade against Israel before we go into Cenk and his crusade against reality as it applies to Israel?
Yeah, for sure. I'll be on in my laptop in a second as well, so we'll be off this slightly odd camera angle. But I think my thing about Cenk, this is my thought about Cenk in general, and it struck me with these debates, and it struck me with just his behavior on the Young Turks for years now. And that's just how, I guess you'd say, unprofessional he is, how kind of crass and how much unintelligence he communicates in his behavior, because his whole manner is not to really kind of debate in an intelligent way or kind of have a cut and thrust of argument. It's to he'll kind of listen to what someone says, kind of insult them vaguely, and then kind of parrot their words back to them in a stupid voice. Um, so it's amazing to me that someone like him, who does that kind of thing, who engages in those kind of behaviors, has this career speaking. It doesn't seem, it seems like either in his time, years of doing it, he would have developed proper skills in that, or he would have or he would have stopped doing it, or he wouldn't have been successful. So he was doing his usual kind of shtick, I guess. So that was the main thing. And then also, we'll go into this later, but I was thinking, how does someone end up like this? Because I think he's in a way quite representative of a lot of the people who are really entrenched in that position. Because I don't think it's through diligently looking at the facts, trying to understand the history, trying to come to a rational position. I think it's, I mean, spoiler for what I think about it, but I think it's through tribalism, really. I think that's what it really is.
Yeah, and we are going to give Cenk the benefit of the doubt that he believes what he says rather than does it for the audience. Although I don't think if that makes it better. But there have been people. Alex Jones, I think, at some point actually admitted that what he's saying is bullshit, but people buy it, so he's selling it. I don't know. I don't know if that is the case with Cenk. I assume not. I mean, one of the things I saw in preparation for today was early on. I think it's from October when he was talking to Piers Morgan. I think Piers Morgan. I've been resisting doing an episode about him, but he deserves the ARCUK daily objective treatment at some point. So this was early on, and he was saying, of course, he was doing the things that some on the anti-Israel side do, which is pay lip service to, Hamas is bad and so on. And at some point, he says, he's talking about his Jewish friends, and he says, some of my, and then he stops himself and goes, friends are Jewish and, have been friends for years. You could see that he was about to say, some of my best friends are Jews, and, stopped himself. And, but yeah, he hasn't stopped himself from the essence of the argument and the anti-Israel case, which again, if it's not anti-Semitism, you have to ask the question, why is it that you're particularly obsessed with that one state that happens to be Jewish, happens to be the closest thing to a free country by a country mile in the Middle East? Um, and yeah, that is what we see from Cenk in recent months. That is his main focus.
Yeah. One of the ones that I rewatched in anticipation of this was his debate he did. I think it would have been in November. I can't quite remember when. That he did with Douglas Murray on Piers Morgan. This was because I think Cenk, did he do one directly with Piers Morgan, then he did one with Douglas Murray and Piers Morgan.
There was one in late December or mid to late December with Douglas Murray on Piers Morgan. Yeah, that was the previous time we dedicated a whole episode for Cenk on this show.
Yeah, that one, that he was on especially bad form in that one. And to be fair, although I have a lot of good things to say about Douglas Murray, Douglas Murray wasn't completely on top form in that one, I don't think. But Douglas Murray tries to get him a little bit by saying that he's too concerned with the Jews, with the Jewish state. That's what really bothers him. And it might be that, because believe me, obviously there's a lot of that going on that people aren't really wanting to admit to. Um, and as I said, I think it's tribalism that's going on. So certainly that would feed into the tribalism. But I wonder whether it's almost one step removed for him, because maybe he is anti-Semitic, but maybe, I don't know, maybe he isn't, in the sense that I think I think maybe what it's coming from is a kind of second-handedness. So when I said, how do people end up in these positions? I think probably what it is he kind of wanted to be kind of lefty, kind of be progressive when he was younger. He kind of knew this was the lefty progressive line, to be pro Palestine. He's from a Muslim background, and a lot of Muslims, I think, are kind of tribally in favor of the Palestinian cause because they feel a kind of loyalty to it. They kind of feel like they would be persecuted. He also tried to accuse Douglas Murray of being Islamophobic and racist in that debate on absolutely no grounds at all. And I wonder whether it's that actually. It's the kind of it's just the kind of tribalism he wants to be lefty, so he's pro-Palestine, and he's also is a Muslim, so he's kind of defensive of what he views as the Muslim position on this, so therefore he's pro-Palestine. I wonder whether it's that than kind of active anti-Semitism. I might be wrong. Do you think that's plausible?
It might be plausible. I wondered because he self-identifies as Muslim or from a Muslim background. I'm not even sure I understand. I keep thinking when I watch him, his cortisol levels must be spiking all over the place, and what really helps regulate that is some streaky bacon that's perfect for it. So maybe that is the solution to whatever ails Cenk. But we were talking yesterday on the reality show Extra about the debate he did with Destiny. We were right at the start. He was asked, "Is what Israel doing in Gaza genocide?" And he says it depends on how you define genocide, which of course is always the case with anything you say. Now in this more the one I saw from October with Piers Morgan, he says at some point about the occupation that it's bigotry by definition. So Cenk has some sort of war here on definitions, which I think it's kind of necessary for him to push the line that he's pushing. Do you understand? Because he didn't explain, and of course Piers Morgan didn't ask him. But how is the occupation, whatever objections people have to what they call the occupation, how is that bigotry by definition? And yeah, any thoughts on what depends on how you define genocide actually means in terms of how the Palestinian propaganda machine works, and what Cenk is kind of admitting by bringing that question up.
So as to how it's bigotry by definition, I suppose what he's getting at is that if you were to really understand Israel to be an occupying power, then I suppose occupying powers often employ prejudicial attitudes, bigotry, condescending views of their opponents in some way, to dehumanize them, something like that. I would have to imagine that's the kind of thinking he's getting at there. So, or maybe just that to engage in occupation of
of some other people, you have to be a bigot in some way. I guess I don't know. You're asking me to really, um, draw blood from a stone
Yeah,
with Cenk.
I threw you into that question and didn't tell you it was coming. So there was another point he made that was I found absolutely shocking. I'll get to it in a minute, but I will thank Catherine. I'll thank Bonnie. Thank you for your super chats. Thank you, Christian, for your super chat. Christian says, Cenk is really incredibly bad in debates. Would you consider an ARCUK episode regarding Israel hater, foreign policy expert John Mearsheimer? Um, I will consider Googling him. Morgan, do you know who that is?
I know his name, yeah, but I can't put a name to a face. So his name has definitely come up more than once. He's a name I'm familiar with, but I'm completely blanking on who he is. Um, but yeah, Cenk is supremely awful in debate. I think he's pretty awful in monologue as well when he's on the Young Turks and he's just kind of going off. He's got the same problems, but yeah, I'll just make the same point in a way, is that it's extraordinary to me that he one thinks he can be president in this manner. Maybe that's not so extraordinary since we've had Trump in, because it's not exactly that Trump was a kind of intellectual, loquacious heavyweight. But um, I the Young Turks kind of, when I first came across them when I was a teenager, um, I didn't like them, but I guess I was left leaning. So they struck me as probably a channel for people who considered themselves politically radical or something like that, who were kind of, interested in politics and wanted to be very aware of social issues and so on. And so in a way, kind of intellectually curious, precocious people. And when you're a teenager, that I think, even if you're kind of obnoxious about it, I think that's a kind of positive trait, because you'll probably grow out of the worst parts of it, right? Um, and so it's amazing to me that they were able to strike that tone with me, and yet he communicates so much unintelligence and communicates so much crassness. I mean, Douglas Murray, I thought, was right when he called him a bit of a thug on the show, because that's just the manner in which he communicates. And that's when I think he said he was a racist. Earlier on in the show, I think Douglas Murray said something like, everyone of your ilk kind of says this. And what he means is everyone who defends Palestine. But Cenk jumped on Australia, was like, what do you mean, people of my ilk? As if that's what Douglas Murray was saying live on TV. Right.
Yeah, by the way, this is one of the reasons why I've really become a big fan of the expression "these people," because first of all, it is putting people of a certain ilk in a group, and it's dismissive enough and throws enough in their direction that if they catch it and say, you know what, that's racist, then you see really their intellectual level. And I think with Cenk, the anger when it's on his own platform to his own audience works with that audience, because that audience will go to him because he's passionate. Yeah, if you're angry and shouting all the time and look like you're about to cause damage to yourself, then you look passionate. But I really don't understand how his audience watches him debate and doesn't say, hang on, this guy, when we did the episode about his debate with Douglas Murray, I told Mark I thought he was more optimistic than I was, but he was optimistic that his audience, Cenk's audience, will see Douglas Murray really, it was a very one-sided debate. Well, I disagree with you. I think Douglas did very well on that debate, and Cenk did particularly bad. And yeah, Mark is hopeful that stuff like that will cause people to change their mind. It could happen. Some people who will cause people to change their mind are our sponsors. Yeah, we have a sponsor for today's episode. The Ayn Rand Institute is sponsoring today's show. The Ayn Rand Institute invites young people who have read Ayn Rand's fiction and are interested in studying objectivism more deeply, with an eye to a potential intellectual career, to AynRandCon. If you live in Europe, we invite you to apply for a scholarship to join us for AynRandCon-Europe 2024, taking place March 8th until 10th in Amsterdam. And if you live in the US, we invite you to apply for a scholarship to join us for AynRandCon-US 2024, March 22nd to 24th in Austin, Texas. You'll have the chance to delve deeper into objectivism and explore its application to a wide array of topics. You'll also have many opportunities to engage directly with experts in Rand's ideas, as well as meet Ayn Rand University faculty and get to know current Ayn Rand University students and hear about their experiences. The deadline for applying for a scholarship is January 31st, 2024, 11:59 Pacific US time. So that is very soon. That's next week. So make sure you apply. There is a link in the description and in the live chat. Morgan, you've been to at least one of those. I've been to all the European ones, by the way. I recommend them. And we will have somebody from the Ayn Rand Institute on the reality show coming up next. Yeah.
Yes, I've been to the one in London, and it is really good fun. I do recommend everyone go. It is a good opportunity. You'll see sort of all the great ARI speakers there, usually giving original talks or kind of doing fresh material. So it's always very interesting. You can go up and ask them questions at the end. They're very approachable, very nice. Everyone's very friendly, looking to talk to people. So it's a good experience, and something which I guess was a novel experience for me when I went, which Razzie, you kind of teased me about, was I was always stunned by how tall people were, or how not tall they were relative to me. Because when you see people on camera like this, you kind of have to...
Daniel wants to mention to our audience that he and I will also be there, and I think you will be there as well, Morgan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I'm not going this year. But...
All right. So, but you can meet Daniel and myself. Yeah, and they are all very nice. You know who doesn't seem nice is the man we're talking about today. Let's go back to him. Yeah, there was one point in his conversation with with who was it? Piers Morgan, where he says something about and again, this is weeks after the attack. He says Israel should end the occupation now, immediately, and that's the only way to bring peace. And again, Piers Morgan doesn't ask him because Piers Morgan is wishy-washy. He's like, he's the both sides kind of person. How will it bring peace? That's, this is the question I would have asked. How is ending the occupation, as you call it? How is Israel saying we are now backing off militarily now after the atrocities of October 7th? How is that going to change anything? What is that going to change? Is Hamas going to say, "Oh, you backed off, so we're going to lay down our arms"? Is funding to the Palestinians from the West through UNRWA, is that going to change? Is the education system going to change? Is society going to decide they are no longer dedicated to killing Jews? So these people really can talk out of their ass and have nobody challenge them on it. Whereas the fact is, Cenk knows. And he's against Israel, so it doesn't matter to him. But Cenk knows if Israel wants to live in peace, what they need to do is win this conflict militarily in a decisive manner.
Yeah, and so with his debate on Destiny, one thing that Destiny did, which was quite good, was kind of pressed him on when he was criticizing Israel for the manner in which they waged war, for the manner of munitions they were using. Destiny really pushed him on saying, well, how should they be doing it? And Cenk's answer was that, well, they should send in special forces and they should go very methodically through the tunnels, kind of man by man. And obviously, Destiny did the right thing and kind of erupted and said, that's going to lead to loads of Israeli soldiers dying. And Cenk didn't really have an answer to that. He kind of ummed and ahed and tried to argue against it in a way, but he didn't have an answer because, of course, that would be the truth. And what that really gets to is either one, he doesn't really have the view that what the government is there to do is to protect its own citizens and then therefore to protect the lives of its own soldiers first and foremost. So it should engage in tactics which aren't going to needlessly endanger their lives, like doing what he suggested.
Yeah, I heard him make the same point on Piers Morgan. What a despicable thing to say. I mean, because what that means is, okay, Hamas has, again, devoted themselves to killing Jews, has committed the worst atrocities we've seen, on video ever in, on such a scale, and the Palestinian people participated and cheered. And what we now need to do is send soldiers to what is almost certainly going to be their death, because special forces is not a lot of people surrounded by savages. By the way, he at some point accidentally says, I think he accuses the West of calling them savages. But yes, Cenk, that is the fact. They are savages. And so they would go in there, they would die. They would not release the hostages because the people are taking part in this. The hostages are hidden in people's homes. Who is going to tell the special forces where the hostages are? So it's really a despicable thing. It's yeah, it's the kind of thing that you say when you don't actually want the side that you're claiming you understand as a victim here to win a war.
Yeah, for sure. And we were talking a bit about whether he's motivated by anti-Semitism or not. Ultimately, whether he is or he isn't, his views on it and the method he would prescribe Israel to wage the war and add up to the continued death of Israelis. A ceasefire would lead to that, or the manner in which he thinks Israel should be waging the war would lead to that. So that's ultimately what he's advocating for. I think also what's clear in the manner in which he goes about arguing for this is because he'll launch all this stuff against Israel, and then someone like Douglas Murray will say, "But look, Hamas are the real villains in the picture." They'll say something like that, and then he'll say, "But of course, I of course, I condemn Hamas. You have no idea how upset I was on October 7th." So he'll kind of do a bit of hand waving to give it the veneer of kind of, isn't Hamas terrible? But then actually the majority of his time, the majority of his kind of emotional intensity is directed towards Israel and not towards Hamas at all. You don't get long dissertations about how terrible Hamas are and how much they're the people oppressing the Palestinians day in, day out. All you get is about Israeli occupation and all this kind of stuff. So it shows you really just on that level what he really thinks the problem is in the region, and it's Israel. It isn't Hamas. And whilst I don't know how it figures out in his mind whether he secretly kind of thinks Hamas is pretty good, probably not. But ultimately, given the way in which he speaks about it, he can't think they're as bad as the Israelis. He must think the Israelis are worse.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Wes, for the super chat. Moda says at some point Israel wasn't occupying Gaza. Yeah, I mean, look, the occupation is something that they've been saying. If Israel were now to withdraw from the West Bank to the 1967 borders in whatever time is left between and the complete annihilation of the state of Israel, people will still say there's an occupation. So yeah, the word occupation is one of those things that they throw in there. They after the so-called occupation of Gaza ended in 2005, they've added different complaints like open air prison and so on. But yeah, they like I always say, they do know better. They're not speaking out of ignorance. They're not like the woman who chanted from the mountains to the sea and didn't know what she was talking about and was asked what mountains. That's not Cenk. He might not be, he's not, the most intelligent person on that side of the argument, but he is knowledgeable enough and intelligent enough to know exactly what he's doing. And I saw a very small bit of that debate with Destiny, and at some point what I was impressed by is Destiny saying, something to the effect of, this is not just Hamas, this is the Palestinian people. It saddens me that so few people, we say this on the channel all the time, but it saddens me that so few people understand that this is actually, always the case. You can't wage such a war if the people are against you. Hamas would, when Hamas was fighting with the PLO, that was what they were focused on. They weren't planning any major attacks. They had to get rid of the PLO in Gaza before they could go back to focusing on Israel. So there is no opposition, no real opposition to Hamas. There are other factions who share the goal and just maybe have slight variations on how to do it. But yeah, this is the attack on October 7th. We can't repeat this enough. The attack on October 7th was committed by the Palestinian people and their representatives, Hamas. And yeah, and we spoke about this. We spoke about this a lot. We spoke about this on yesterday's show where we showed, the so-called suffering on October 7th. There was no suffering. There were celebrations because Jews had been killed, Jews had been tortured, Jews had been taken captive by these savages, and that was, what you see from Hamas is the Palestinian people, and that is what Cenk is siding with, even if he pays lip service to calling it atrocities.
For sure. And no matter how much he kind of pays lip service, actually, some of the other people on his network are much more forthright about their opinions than he is. And I think is it his nephew Hassan Piker who sometimes goes and says stuff like America deserved 9/11 or brought it on themselves and things like that. So he certainly doesn't see any problem with hanging around with people who are much more forthright about saying the kind of things which he kind of skirts around the edges of, or does the kind of veneer of plausibility, hand waving kind of stuff. So he's certainly worth condemning very, very strongly in all these things. And yeah, it's remarkable that he thinks he's gonna win office with this. I don't know. Presumably, he thinks he must have a chance of winning. We'll see.
I don't think he thinks he has a chance of winning, and of course it's not compatible with the Constitution. He's naturalized, not natural born. So I think he's trying to challenge that whole idea. But yeah, of course he's not gonna. And of course, imagine. But let's imagine a Cenk presidency. The world would be a much worse place. America would be much worse off because his ideas for domestic policy are the only thing that's worse than that is his ideas for foreign policy. But yeah, we can try to take comfort in the fact that he's not going to become president, but we should pay close attention to the fact again that somebody like that has such a massive audience, has people listening to him for the news, for his views, just actually taking him seriously, and we see the effect of that in the culture, and we should worry.
For sure. Well, he boasts in the Douglas Murray debate they get 5 billion views a year. 5 billion. So we need to work a bit harder at chipping away at that.
And we will continue to do so. So if you see value in this episode and want our audience to grow to the size of Cenk Uygur's audience, Morgan might consider running for president of the U.S. at some point if that happens. Are you a U.S. citizen? I actually don't remember.
No, I have U.S. family, but I'm a British
Okay,
citizen.
you're not a U.S. citizen. You're also too young to be president by legally, but hey, we can challenge the Constitution as well. So
What are
yeah,
the rules?
share, like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and comment below. And of course, we have 2 shows a day on weekdays. So the reality show follows in a few minutes. We're gonna ask why civilized people support the savages, and we have Don Watkins joining us for that episode. So make sure you tune in. That starts in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Morgan. I'll see you over on the reality show in a minute.
Cheers. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.